I know we have gradually more and more people seeing these tapes at more and more different times and more different places. And even those of you seeing this on tape that may find yourself enjoying it, I know that you still for a while want to know what it is. And of course you see that, or you'll catch on that I resist saying what it is, or to give it a name. And yet you're wired up to want to know what it is. But let me point out at least one thing. If you go out to the opera, if you go out to the movies, if you go out to church, and you say you enjoy yourself, and if you say watching these tapes that you enjoy them, you know, what is it? I'm going to tell you what it is. It's the same in type. It's not that dissimilar from the kinds of activities that I mentioned out in the world. And it's this. You come here or you watch these tapes because apparently, all right, strike apparently, I say things and your brain begins to turn out certain kinds of chemicals that make you feel good. That's it. But it's the same thing if you go to see, if it's not the opera, if you went to see the Who, if you were that old, if you go out and do anything, what else is there? And if you think that this is in some way special, notice this. We're not feeding you, or you people seeing on tape, you're not having booze or dope served to you. And I assume nobody's putting sex on you while you're doing this. And so you're coming for one reason. Now you may think, if you had thought to yourself, well, this is some sort of very exotic, some kind of metaphysical, or God knows what. But I'm going to tell you what it is. If you ain't getting fed, fucked, put to sleep, patted, massaged, given some kind of narcotic, and you enjoy it, whether it was opera or here, but here you're not getting into those other things, it's very simple what's happening. What you hear me say at times makes your brain turn out certain neurotransmitters that make you feel good. That's it. It's pleasurable. What else the hell you want? Well, I want a name for it. There it is. And I may slip up on you tonight. Several people's already asked me if I would say a bit more, and I'm just not going to say a bit more particular about it, but it's a nice intro again about something I mentioned just a night ago. That I said that if life followed a certain kind of predictable path, the way things stand now, that if you took all the social sciences, as they're known, if you took all of psychology, sociology, economics, political science, literature, all of those would eventually become biology or zoology combination. And then if it was biology, zoology, then zoology would become simply biology. All the social sciences would become biology. Then biology would become chemistry, and chemistry would become physics, and then physics would become something else. The other night I called it non-specific physics, which doesn't tell you much, but it would still be going along that kind of path. Just hang on. I have not really changed the subject. Along with that, and me mentioning in response to several continuing questions that pop up about people feeling as though they've got a real problem out in ordinary life and what to do with it. And I have specifically, and then sometimes to the people individually and otherwise, I've given kind of specific ideas and things you could do to handle when it is that you seem to have been put upon. But let me point out that in the three-dimensional world, living here on planet Earth under all ordinary conditions, there is such a thing as truth and justice. There is. When you're dealing with a 3D world and you're dealing with a comparable, a parallel, a suitable intelligence, which everyone is born with if you're not genetically defected up here, then there is truth and justice. No matter how I talk about it otherwise potentially to you people and to say that it's only a part of something larger. But left to the devices and limitations of this life, there is truth and justice. And it is correct to be mad, to be hurt, and to be vengeful when you seem to have been victim of frauds, lies, thefts. It is correct. You're supposed to. Once this feeling, take that as being a whole little string there tied together, a molecular string of mad, hurt, vengeful, that once this gets into the limbic cortical loop in that kind of mode, you're being pretty optimistic to hope that talk will do away with it. It reaches a point in the three-dimensional world, if this kind of mode runs through your limbic, the way you feel, and it's got to be tied in, of course, to your thinking, to the cortical, that you are thinking how you were lied to, how you were cheated. And the hurt, the anger, ends up in that little linear description, the desire for revenge. It is correct. And on that level, there's almost no salve, there's almost no soothing, there's almost no satisfactory conclusion to that rather than physical mayhem. Other than the actual attempt, the desire, if not the success, to gain revenge, to execute justice, that I have been lied to in a way that cost me money or a job. At my expense, somebody cheated me. Now, in the three-dimensional world, in the world of three-dimensional intelligence, this is perhaps the most general ill state of being that's possible. The condition wherein you feel powerless. It is like the big 3 H's. To be humbled, humiliated, and helpless. There are people who are generally wired up. They would be, in the social sciences on this planet, probably referred to as introverted, shy, perhaps self-abusing personality types. But the kinds of people who feel that they are constantly being put upon, that they're being cheated, they've been cheated most of their life, their parents and all this, and it's taken to be primarily, even in sophisticated, educated circles, being some sort of psychological problem. Everyone has some experience, but there do seem to be people wired up who generally feel it more than others. But whether you feel it, that it's an experience that is fairly common to you, or whether you find it to be fairly exceptional, it is a humbling, it is a frustrating, it is, according to the way you're wired up, either very hurtful or it can become very hateful and lead to the desire for revenge, to execute justice, that I have been defrauded. There's the person who did it. And never mind any sort of discussion, any theoretical discussion about everyone has their own burdens to bear, and maybe it's some sort of punishment, maybe it's some kind of unconscious desire on my part to be hurt. Never mind all that. I have been cheated, and it's quite simple. There's the person who did it, and I know how to get over this feeling. Is I'll go to that person, and I will, if I must, physically, abusively so, take away that which will put me back in the position I was before that person cheated me. And yet, living under conditions which most of us do, and living under the conditions under which most people are wired up, this is less and less an apparent option. Most people seeing this tape, hearing this in person, are of the sort now wired up to easily attempt physical mayhem on another person, to execute your own attempted justice. So you are left with what appears to be the recourse of talk. Now, if it appears to be external, the talk takes its manifestation in such a way as you wait for society, you wait for the larger group. Once you make them aware of how you've been cheated, and if the way in which you've been cheated and the way in which you can describe it meets certain standards, and all the I's get dotted and T's get crossed in society through the law, and if not through the law, perhaps through some form of trying to ostracize and separate the person from the goodwill of the community, will attempt to execute justice for you. But if it is internal, If we forget about that, and there you sit seething over the fact that I have been lied to, I have been defrauded, I have been cheated, I have had goods, services, my good name, whatever, taken away from me, and there's the person. There is the person who did it. Then you are left, you understand what I'm saying now, is you're attempting to deal with it internally. You are then left with what? Under all ordinary conditions, you are left with in some way trying to talk yourself out of it. Trying to rationalize it, trying to call upon the gods, trying to call upon stories that you have heard that in some way will justify, if not materially, the position, the condition in which this person has put you, but in some way if you can internally justify, like, well, he'll get his. Or you start repeating some proverb, you know, cheaters never win. Or that which you steal from me now will be taken from you at a later date. You can attempt to do that, but you have got to be very optimistic to believe in the 3D level. That's not sarcasm, but you have really got to be optimistic. You've got to wire it up to be just a bloody optimist to really believe that that kind of talk to yourself is going to facilitate, to cause some molecular change in your brain, because that is what we're talking about. You have, I might point out as an aside, between the two kinds of basic approaches I just mentioned of attempting to let society, remember, the larger creature than the individuals that can do things that the individual cannot, to let it attempt to execute justice, or you internally are attempting in some way to stop yourself from being eaten up by anger, humiliation, or the desire for revenge. Between those two, and off to the side, let me point out something else, is the difficulty as far as it reaching what appears to be the desired conclusion throughout history in ways that seem to be the individual trying to interact with larger groups to facilitate release from anger, hurt, frustration, the desire for revenge. Classically, it has been through religion. Now you might look at it as being psychological, the certain arts, if not sciences, of psychology and psychiatry. And you could look at it as a further extension. If you had some knowledge of so-called academic contemporary psychology and psychiatry, you might attempt in a way to analyze yourself, which is just a form of what people used to call rationalization. That you are trying to talk literally the chemistry of your brain into another position. Now don't put a period on all this yet. But under ordinary conditions in the 3D world, you have got to be an optimist to expect that the kinds of promises, shouts, and curses that one can make toward one's own brain chemistry under all ordinary conditions is going to bring about a change in the chemistry. That is, to relieve you of being mad. That has been the difficulty in that little middle area that I started to point out, that if indeed religion and psychiatry and other three-dimensional institutions, societies, if they indeed were intended to come to some satisfactory conclusion as described in their own brochures, in their own protocol, if indeed they did that, then you've got to see, if that was the intention, that they have not had a high success rate. Of course, they're not supposed to, but if they were supposed to, that is, if religion was supposed to, all the numerous religions, if indeed the religions were supposed to cure you from wanting revenge and to be upset in a continuing manner that was bothering you, which of course is a chemical upset, it's a molecular upset, they don't call it that. But if indeed that was the attempt, then you should, throughout history, should have been able to go to a priest or a rabbi and say, so-and-so cheated me, and I tried to get over it, as our church teaches. And the guy would say, yeah, we do. You know, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, in all religions. Somewhere they say that. Don't try to fool with that. I tried to tell myself that, but it didn't work. What I do? And the priest says, well, you just got to tell yourself again that vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Well, but still, it's driving me nuts. I stay awake at night. I'm getting heartburn. My blood pressure is going up. I've already had it checked. Because of me, all I want to do, I think about strangling the guy, and I don't want to do that. Of course, what he's saying is, I am wired up in such a way that I don't want to. I'm afraid to. I'm not going to do it, but I can't stop wanting to. And the priest or rabbi or minister has to say, listen, not only vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, or Allah, or whoever, also our religion says that you're not supposed to hurt your fellow man. You're supposed to turn the other cheek. You're supposed to turn the other whatever. The guy says, I know that, I know that, I know that. What else can I do? And the priest said, look, I told you everything. You know, if that doesn't help, all you've done is you just hit that bump in the road known as we're human. You just got to get over it. Pray a lot. Give some more money to the church. Buy a new window for the temple. Do something. And so you leave. You individual and all of humanity, because if the purpose, the actual purpose of religion was as it stated, then you'd have to say it failed. But it's not, and it hasn't. If psychiatry actually was supposed to get people over angers that cannot be properly executed, used in some profitable way, then they don't do it. Rationalization. If you're doing it on your own without a priest, rabbi, or psychiatrist, ordinarily you've got to understand it doesn't work. Time, horizontal time may be enough that you get over actually having stomach acids and adrenaline and everything begin to get your body out of balance. You may get over desiring revenge, except every time you hear his name, every time you think about him, every time you see something on TV, it comes back to you. Under ordinary conditions, talk to yourself, talk with another ordinary person is pretty futile in changing one's brain chemistry. Always has been, has not changed. That situation has not changed noticeably in several thousands of years. Still with the example of someone has cheated you and you feel powerless. Now you can feel powerless in other ways. You can feel powerless when you believe that you are deathly ill and you're spitting up blood, and you can feel powerless until you get to a doctor. You can feel powerless until the doctor can finally come up with some apparently secure, certain diagnosis which is not fatal. And then you do not feel powerless. But up until that time, you do feel powerless. And people at that certain times, their brain chemistry can start putting out these word messages such as, boy, it reminds you of how tenuous life is. Boy, it makes you aware of your own mortality. Powerless. But now get above that kind of life-threatening situation. Someone has lied to you, someone has defrauded you, and you feel powerless because you cannot execute justice. Now this is a kind of non-morbific, it's not life-threatening, it is not operating at the down below the pre-speech level that it's going to make you physically ill in and of itself, much less kill you, how this person cheated you. But you have been made ill by it. But the illness is in the brain. It is not an invasion of your body through a virus. It is not something that has entered you in any manner outside the senses, which the only thing that can enter and interfere with the chemistry of your body outside the senses is intrusion by bacteria. Above that level, you are talking about brain chemistry. You are talking about the person has cheated you. It will not kill you. It in and of itself does not even have a physical effect on you. And yet now you are being affected physically. Your brain is causing you, the chemistry of your brain is causing you to suffer. And there seems to be no way out. The way out, perhaps, now I'm not of course telling any of you to do this, may be physical mayhem. It may still be, not that anybody should do it, but you should be aware that on that level, What satisfies once you've been cheated, once you have been lied to in whatever particular way, turned your brain chemistry into this very unhappy chemical production plant about this matter, and you can't seem, you don't have the proof, or you don't have the interest or the money or whatever to actually get them into, or put them into the hands of society and let justice. Because even if you do, perhaps you go through that and they find the person guilty and put them on 6 months probation, and they turn around and smile at you and walk out of the courtroom. It may be worse than it was. That God Almighty, now you're not only mad at him or her, now you're mad at society, the way things are going downhill. At that level, the only thing that might put an end to that would be physical mayhem. Now I bring this up because everyone still, or most of you, have still got a piece of that. And also, anytime that you cannot, or you find it just absolutely incomprehensible that somebody in the midst of a civilized city of Paris, London, kills somebody. In the police report on the news right quick, it says, man found stabbed to death on the corner of such and such street. Some witnesses say he and his brother-in-law were arguing over a 25-cent debt. Now many generally wired up civilized people will hear that and go, my God, you know, it just frightens you to think you're living in this world. 25 cents. It wasn't 25 cents, it was brain chemistry. It was the guy had been cheated. Let's assume that his brother-in-law did. They made a bet about something, about whether somebody could run across the street before the light changed. And the guy won. The guy won, and his brother-in-law said, he said, pay me my quarter, man. He said, I ain't going. Well, never mind, I got to go. And it went on for days or weeks. I'm not sure I have to go much further with you. If any of you really find that to be tales from a foreign planet, I'm not sure you belong in there, because you're not really in touch. Your feet are not firmly planted enough on Mother Earth for me to ever try to get you to lift off in a rocket somewhere. You're still floating around in the never land of Peter Pan. Because a person can easily kill somebody else, apparently over 25 cents, but that wasn't it. It was the different balance in their brain chemistry, and we would call it, before I get to the heart of where I'm going tonight, they'd call it some kind of idée fixe, some sort of almost psychotic desire for revenge, that the person was unbalanced to kill over a quarter. All right, yeah. They're unbalanced, but they're using that psychologically. They were unbalanced in this sense. The general state of the brain chemistry of people in the society in which this happened, in which reported on the news, in the same society in which the other people lived that went, my God. That society's general brain chemistry is such that you're not supposed to kill somebody else. The 25 cents just makes it sound worse. But you have got it in you, and when you find it, where I was going to try to point you right quick, I'll go back and try to make it right quick one more time, is to be amazed that somebody could kill somebody else over 25 cents. Think about the times that you have been so outraged over a period of years. It wasn't over 25 cents. It could have been worse to you, or less, but to you it was worse. Something that a relative said to you 20 years ago, a 3 or 4 word sentence, or maybe a 1 word sentence that somebody said something about you and the relative went, eh. And for 20 years you've been thinking about that person that you loved and trusted and thought so highly of, the time that somebody made a remark about you, and instead of this person jumping in and taking your side, they went, eh. And for 20 years you've been hearing them go, eh, eh. Well, that's much more important than a quarter. Right, yeah. And you can't get over it. And you may have tried on your own. If you had been more religious, you may have prayed. You may have asked your religious leader for some guidance. How can I forgive this person? You may have tried to talk to yourself after reading books on psychology. You have tried to rationalize. I don't mean that in a pejorative sense, but you have tried to describe, well, maybe she didn't mean it. I bet she's already forgotten about it. Why can't I forget about it? You can talk all you want to, but you'll remember that there are people who suddenly turn on one of their own blood kin, and according to the news, killed them over a 25-cent debt. The brain chemistry, after a certain length of time, put them in such a place that they thought, shit, I ain't going to live like this, and they killed him. And in a sense, dig it, felt better, relieved. Now we certainly Probably most people don't live around people like that, and you hope that you don't have a brother that you've married into a family and you've got a brother-in-law like that, and etc. But to think that that is something foreign or that that is some sort of psychotic behavior, you're wrong. The attempt to change behavior is the attempt to change the brain chemistry in yourself. And I am going to point out to you what should be super obvious once you see it, and then you can forget about it, of course. That you're playing on the wrong field. You're expecting way too much to believe that you can make promises, that you can make curses, that you can have all the good intentions of the world, and it is going to change the molecular structure, the chemical, present chemical makeup of your brain. In a battle, apparently, of you shouting at and cursing your own genetic makeup, the winner is already known. If you have a genetic propensity to be an alcoholic if you drink, or if you had a genetic metabolic, which would have to inclination, which now even everyday medical science knows this, that there are people that they're finding there's no big secret, they are metabolically already wired up since they were a kid to burn food, all the carbohydrates, proteins, and fats at a slower rate. Therefore, they are inclined to become overweight, even obese. Shouting at that, cursing that, having every good intention in the world against your own genetic makeup is a fixed fight on the ordinary playing field. But even if that be true, you can do this. If you have a genetic predisposition, and it's even more than that. There are people that, if all of you know this, or if you don't like food, some of you, the example, take alcohol, and I can make up others, or bring up others. There are people who can take a drink, get alcohol in their body, and just immediately it makes them sick, they don't like it, and that's the end of it. If they try it again 10 years later, it's the same thing. Got nothing to do with morality, and there are other people who can take a drink, and it seems to be, it gets past that first stage of producing what alcohol does in the brain that is kind of distasteful to everybody. It gets past that, and it eventually turns into a kind of endorphins or dopamines, I think medical science calls them now. The point is, they enjoy drinking. And they can say things like, it makes me less inhibited, or it just relaxes me. They can say anything they want to. What it has done is changed the brain chemistry. There's no secret to it. And it begins to put out other neurotransmitters that makes the brain feel good, and it makes you feel good. And there are other people that almost as soon as they take a drink are, as the larger group, society calls them, alcoholics. So, you've got that. You've got people that if they eat what you eat, if they eat what their next door neighbor eats, if they eat what their husband or wife eats, the same amount, they get overweight. There it is. But if that be true, and you get past all the good intentions of the world, all the self-talk, all other people talking to you, people saying, please don't drink. Don't you see what drinking does to you? You're not the kind of person that can drink. You can't even have a glass of wine. Can't you see that after 30 years? Or to tell somebody, look, you're going to have to change the way you eat. Don't eat everything I eat because you keep complaining about your weight and it keeps going up, so don't do that. Somebody else can do it. What good does it do? You can holler out good intentions. What good does it do? You can say that I am in some sort of inevitably lost battle with my genes. That may be true that the battle is as I described. If you're going to shout, talk to, make promises, make threats, every good intention in the world between you, that is what's talking, and your own genetic makeup is a lost cause. Except for this. You can not drink. at all. You can change the amount that you eat. You could change the type of food you eat. You can do that. That gets absolutely lost. I mean, nobody can deny that. Nobody can say that on any given night that I never say anything that's just everyday simple and true. But that is not the way that humans are wired up to approach this, to think about it. Because what they try to do is to win a genetic struggle through mere talk, which amounts to a kind of intentions, which amounts to a kind of attitude, the recollection of your own genetic memory, of your own molecular memory of what's happened to you, and you try to turn that into good intentions that I know better. Or by God, I got to straighten up. And it won't work. It has its own effect to keep things churned up on this planet. But then people look everywhere else. They will blame their propensity to be an alcoholic if they're not already one. Let's say they're already one, or their friends say they are. And they say, well, even if it's true, it's my father's fault, the way he treated me. If it is true that if I am now, if I have a drinking problem, it's my mother's fault. And it's none of that. You can make somebody drunk, you can turn them into an alcoholic through electrical shocks in the right place to the brain. You can make people hungry, you can make people not hungry. They don't have to take amphetamines, you don't have to go on a diet. You can play with the brain chemistry, and they surely know enough by now, I'm sure they do. Trust me. That they can change the brain chemistry, and they could cut your appetite out just forever. Like you just starve to death and never be hungry. The way the brain is wired up, what you think of ordinarily as consciousness, that there is no distinction between this. It is this vague, non-specific area which is three-dimensional life that people cannot see, that the mouth, the spokesman for the brain itself, cannot argue, cannot complain, cannot decry, denounce, threaten the genetic makeup of everything, which includes itself, and make it change. That's what I meant with no sarcasm, really. That you have got to be terribly optimistic to believe that ordinary talk is going to change the molecular structure of what you are, and specifically the chemical makeup of your present brain activity. There is a basis for it if people wouldn't try it. People wouldn't believe in analysis. People wouldn't go to confession. People wouldn't believe in prayer. We're getting to that. Not prayer, but we're getting to the reality of it. The reality of it does not exercise itself fully in the three-dimensional world. Of course, it's not supposed to. But it does not. And that's why I keep saying tonight that you have got to be terribly optimistic based upon the evidence at hand and the evidence for the last 3,000 years. That ordinary talk is a fit wrestling companion or a fit weapon to change your own molecular, chemical makeup. The kinds of example, one thing before I get closer to where I was going tonight, the kinds of things I pointed out that you could use: being cheated, being lied to, being stolen from. That I pointed out that you can use it, and I pointed out that even life has that information crudely available in religions about the power it would be to forgive people and to turn the other cheek if you could do it, and etc., which people cannot really do it. But I pointed out that if you find out that you can do it, what a pleasant surprise it is, and it can make you stronger. But it's not psychological, it's not spiritual, it's chemical. And rather than those kinds of situations wherein you feel completely humbled and helpless, out of control, that somebody has cheated me, just did it. And I said, you cheated me, no? Yeah, well, all right, yeah, I know what you mean. Well, give it back to me. No, I'm not. By God, give it back to me. No. I'll get you. Well, maybe you will, but I'm not giving it back. And instead of being helpless and humiliated, and instead of just trying to rationalize it, instead of trying to talk to yourself in any ordinary sense, instead of trying to pray to God somewhere that, boy, get him, make him, get him good. And you look around and he's stealing from other people and getting richer and fatter, and he seems to be happier. And you are even more humiliated, feeling even more helpless. With the right kind of knowledge, the right kind of know-how, which I was going to try to point out in a minute, the right kind of effort and attention to it, you can take that chemical condition inside of your own limbic, cortical loop, that is, this desire for revenge that I have literally been cheated. You can take that, and instead of it being a continuing, non-satisfying street, other than if you did go ahead off the deep end and just physically sought revenge, it might relieve you. I'm not telling you to do it by any means. But other than that, to find out that you can take that same kind of chemical condition, that is, you have that kind of outrage, you have that kind of chemical mixture in your brain that is referred to as anger, desire for revenge. You can use that, and instead of feeling humbled, humiliated, and helpless, you can move on to the 3 R's. You can experience or produce on your own rejuvenation, revelation, and release, freedom. That by taking the chemical condition which is already generally out of balance is why people want revenge. So you feel out of balance. You don't have to look for any sense of morality or any religion. The person, you and the other person, can both be atheists. The person stole from you, he just shrugs or just smiles and says, so what? And so you're out of balance. That's why you can't forget it. That's why you keep wanting revenge. That's why you hate the person. So you're out of balance. You have got an unusual, generally speaking, chemical condition in your own brain. You can take that out of balance condition and you can produce new information. That's what I meant by revelation. You can rejuvenate yourself. That is, instead of being tired, being mad at somebody, wanting revenge and can't get it, as the psychiatrists in the South say, will wear you out. It will rejuvenate you, that you will get energy instead of it being drained like the person still stealing from you. All I do is think about it. I'm carrying them around my pocket all the time, hating them, and you can't do anything about it. And it's also released. That is, it frees you from all of it. We've got to turn the tape over. I've been around the edges of something I was going to talk about for a while, and I'm going to skip over some of it and come back in a few days, I guess. But having to do, I was going to do, if there was any linear sense to this, I was going to mention to you that there was a primary and secondary intelligence, and talk to you in such a way. I still plan to go back, but perhaps I'll be a little more enriched after I do what I'm about to do. But to point out to you how the secondary intelligence helps support the primary and brings it more up to date and makes it more complex. But I'm going ahead tonight, since I started talking about chemistry. Now listen. There's really 2 kinds of brains, not right and left, and there's not but one brain. And what I should say, if I did the kinds of things I should do, is I'd say there are 2 kinds of intelligence, or I'd say there are 2 kinds of minds. But everybody and his half-assed brother that owes me a quarter for thousands of years have been saying minds and all New Agers and metaphysics, and I can just barely speak about, call it intelligence. But they're always talking about, godly minds and earthly minds and more expanded minds, as though the mind was something separate from the brain. So even though I know and you only got one brain. Right now I'm going to call it the brain, but remember what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the operations of this organ. But I'm just going to call it the brain right now. You got 2 kinds of brains. And if I had gone through the process, I would have been calling this the primary brain, the secondary brain. Or I'd call it primary intelligence and secondary intelligence. But let me tell you what you got. You got a wet brain and you got a dry brain. Now remember, I'm really, when I say brain right now for the rest of the night, go ahead and to yourself say intelligence, because we still just got one brain. There it is. And forget the right and left brain. I'm just talking about the organ itself. But I'm going to call it brain instead of intelligence. You got a wet one, which is primary, and it's chemical, compared to what I mean by the dry brain, which is oral, it's verbal, and it's secondary. But it's dry compared to the chemical brain, that is the chemical intelligence. When you think about thinking, which is what you're doing when you think about you, even to yourself when you're talking about I and what you want and what you feel, you're thinking about thinking. Unless it has to do with literally, as much as possible, a strictly primary matter. That you're fighting for your life, or you're in some life-threatening situation, or you're starving to death. That you're dealing with something that's almost immediately life-threatening or life-supporting. But other than that, the rest of human activities, which is where almost all of you that will ever see this tape, is where you are, because you're not at the edges of society, you're not at the edges of the larger progression of human evolution, so that you're fighting for your life, or you're fighting for a place to live, or enough food to keep you alive. What you're fighting for, what you're upset by, where you get cheated, where you're trying to expand your own horizons, are in the areas wherein you're thinking about you, which is thinking about thinking. You follow me? You're not thinking about life immediately. Life's either threatening or supportive activities. When you're doing that, from now on, what you should do is you should think bio and not psycho. You should think and even picture this, which makes you think biological, not psychological. The biological aspect is what I'm referring to tonight, is that's the wet brain. And that which everybody now in almost all the world believes to be the actual uniqueness of man. They call it sometimes spirit and personality and all that stuff. But what they're referring to is the dry brain. They're referring to the psychological brain. They are. Whether they're being religious, whether they're being academic, whether they're being a practitioner of some art or science or psychology or psychiatry or medicine, they are talking and saying psychological brain. You should continually, all of the time, think to yourself bio, not psycho. You cannot do it wrong. I know it's not real clear. I think I can get a few of you around you up here in a few more minutes. You can't do it wrong. There's no question about, well, exactly what does it mean? You may think there is right now. Those of you still interested in following this, listen fast, because I'm just going to do it and we're going to stop. You should think, comma, you should picture, comma. So between the two now, you can't get away. You should be able to feel. Your own universe is right here in the center physically of your skull, is the wet brain. It is the chemical activity, and around it is all these other planets, all the other possibilities. It is radiating And this is not something I'm making up. I'm just giving another description of what biologically is going on inside of your brain, which is you. That's it. Is this thing is radiating chemically right now. Those of you who are sitting there and going, Jesus Christ, what does this mean? All that is, all we're talking about are neurotransmitters. Or if some of you are going, I'm about to go to sleep, not because you're physically tired of something, but because I just don't know what this means. I don't know, I can't listen. It's that. Or if some of you now are leaning over, or listening, or wanting to make notes, or thinking, wait a minute, I'm on the verge of really getting something. All we're talking about is I'm saying stuff that in your brain is having reactions that vary all the way from, as I said, that some of you may be going, wait a minute. That's it. It is not a theory. It is not some sort of overlaid map I'm trying to put in your hands and to force you to think, all right, I'm going to start thinking that way. You've got to start thinking that way. Not because I said so, but you're done for. You'd only go so far as long as you take the dry brain. That is what you think of as being thinking, which to everybody is, well, thinking is, well, thinking. You have words, and you have ideas, and you think about them, and perhaps you rearrange them, or you revise them at certain times. It's your thoughts. It's reflective of who you are, perhaps some of your genetic background, your life experiences, even some of your unconscious things coming up. They end up in your mind one way or the other. That's what it is. That's what it is in the 3D world. What it is, you might as well look at the human nervous system. I haven't drawn it in a long time, my version, but you remember. The spine itself. You are looking at the center of the universe. You're looking at your own sun, and that thing is radiating. But it's not radiating thoughts. It's not radiating some kind of unique spirituality. It's radiating chemicals. And if you're sitting there now to yourself thinking, well, that's too simplistic. Or what time is it? Whatever you're thinking, you are dealing with chemical transmitters running in your brain, oozing throughout there, and that's it. The other idea, using my descriptions, albeit, that I said it was a dry brain, is it comes out in the same way that if other people tried to describe the thought processes, as I already did a little bit for them a few minutes ago, it's all wordy, it's chatting. And even when it tries to analyze itself, well, yes, sometimes I do get angry. Sometimes I'll even get angry at somebody I don't know. I'll see somebody walk down the street. I'm getting so good at self-analysis. I'll see somebody walk down the street like with a punk haircut and their green hair, and it's not my business, I guess, and I shouldn't do it, but I think, God damn, how come you think that's attractive? But I just have a feeling like, who the hell were you? I just feel kind of aggressive at the person. But wait a minute, they're kind of aggressive, but they wouldn't do that kind of stuff. Still no sarcasm. But what I mean is everybody not only is talking out loud, but inside your brain. That's what you call everybody else thinking. It's continually talking. It's dry. As long as you are thinking that your thoughts are words, that your thoughts are something beyond chemistry, then you're an earthling. And there's probably nothing I can help you do. Oh, I can keep you entertained, I guess, a while longer. You should constantly. Instead of the old ideas that they used to have about, well, I will remember the name of Allah with each breath, or with every time I exhale, I will say, life is short. Or every time I inhale, I will think, God is great. Or I'll carry around this string of beads, and every other one is prickly, so that when I pull them, and every other one I'll think, every other one is smooth and every one is prickly. And I'll tell myself, or the smooth one, that life is sometimes good. Ooh, and then life is sometimes... See, I'll take the blame on making you laugh some more, but this... If you want to be changed, if you really want to shock, I'm telling you tonight how, is all you got to do is forthwith, maybe I'll say a little bit more, but not much more, is simply you can feel it. You can feel it. All you got to do is think it and you feel it. That right in here, and of course it's not literal in the center, but I know how to do it. I know how to get you started. Is think right in the center of your skull in there, right in the center of the brain itself, right down in the center. It is broadcasting out the different chemical changes of the brain. That is thought. Now some of you have read this. I mean, even ordinary science, neurobiology, well, in the way that science, that life makes science work, you know, like sociobiology and these other things, that makes it, somebody will say, boy, do you realize that all the stuff we've done and all the kinds of 2 or 3 decades now we've had or more of serious exploration of the brains, and people that's had brain damage and Alzheimer's and the different ways that we've had to be inside the human skull and other kind of equipment. Somebody with some credentials here and there will constantly, or somebody will pop up and say, do you realize that the statistics we have now, the information, would almost make you think that there's some possibility that everything that goes on up here is simply a matter of chemistry. And people, somebody around, people go, wow, you know, that's true. You know, I read enough. I've been following what your work, and that's true. And they'll go, wow. And then people say, well, let's go get a drink. Let's talk about it. That's the way it goes. And so, I'm not even telling you anything extraordinary. The extraordinary thing is, I'm telling you, is you can feel, you can continue starting now. And I'm telling you, I wouldn't lay on this, is forget about thought. Is remind yourself whatever's going on. To remind yourself to find some pictures, why the only reason I drew it, and describing to you in the middle of the brain, that what I'm talking about to myself right now, and whatever you're talking to yourself about, is chemistry. That's it. There is no such magic. Of course, I know the electricity is in there too, the activity of the brain, but what you're talking about, basically, it wouldn't operate without either one. But let's take it from the chemical, because that seems to be more material and we can talk about it, and it's plastic. We can drain the fluid out. It's in there. You have a different thought. What you have is a different chemical running through your brain. The balance has changed. It is all a matter of oozing. It's all a matter of juice. It's not a matter of words. It's not a matter of ideals. It's not a matter of consequences. It's not a matter of morality. It's not a matter of decency. It's a matter of the chemicals running in your brain. All the way from how aggressive you are to whether you're prone to be overweight, whether you're prone to be an alcoholic, or whether you're prone to think. It's all the same. Let me give you an extended version. The neural stuffed bomber version. The brain smile. What I'm about to say is true psychologically. Everybody knows this. The whole world knows this. The wiring system of everybody is wired up to know this. But remember, I'm telling you, forget about those dry brain, picture, chatty notions of thought. Because the basis of it, the real transmission of it, is fluid. It's plastic, it's juicy, and it's chemical. It's energy. It's not matter. The words are what seems to be matter. So beyond the validity of this psychologically, remember I'm talking about something else tonight, really. When you apparently have been cheated, when you apparently have been rendered defrauded in the chemistry of your brain, is either hurt, angry, seeking revenge, wants revenge. It's not the situation. But I start out granting you that in the three-dimensional world there is justice. Forget about this idea of relative justice or situational ethics and things that you might have thought I had said, which I told you I wasn't saying it. I was saying how things appear on this planet. But the way things appear on this planet are the way things are on this planet if you are planet-bound. And so there is injustice, because in a limited dimensional world, things apparently stop. And so it is true that at that level somebody can steal from you and you are now defrauded by them. Your life has been lessened. Your possessions, let's say, have been lessened by that person. No doubt about it. They even admit you saw them do it. There's no doubt about it. That's the end of it. That is injustice. It does exist. But now, here you are upset. Seriously upset. It's not the situation, it's your brain. It's the chemistry. And it's got nothing to do with your childhood. You are stressed. You are frustrated. You are mad. But it's your brain chemistry. It is not the situation that hurts. It is not any circumstance that plagues a person. Once you begin to have any suspicion, and hell, you got to have a suspicion, or else you're not listening to me, because I just told you that it's not the situation, it's not any condition. It's your inability, now that you know about it, it's your inability to turn your attention on your own brain chemistry. It's your own lack of giving attention to the fact that right in here are not thoughts. Not in here are not thoughts that this person cheated me, because I know all that they did. But that's not what this is about. That's not what life is about. That's not what thought is about. That is not me doing that. That is chemistry. That can begin to produce a happy combination chemically and produce what I was describing to you as that secret weapon, the super secret. It's a brain smile. I don't know a better description of it. A bunch of you have had this before, and sometimes you may even smile externally, but that is certainly not the point, because it's got nothing to do with facial expressions. It's got nothing to do with your social interaction with other people. But it is a literal brain smile, and if I describe it anymore, then I'm describing it through the dry brain process, which is a terrible translation. Looked at from apparently the other direction, rather than struggling with an undesirable situation, apparently circumstances out there that has upset you. Let's look at it from the basis of happiness. Forget a frustrating example. This is known piecemeal. Happiness, include everything in that. Happiness of being alive. Happiness of whatever you're doing, whatever you just got through doing. Happiness is not a matter of what happened out there, because something can happen out there and one person saying there, be happy by it, be pleased by it, and another person be made sick by it. Happiness of any description is not out there, it's in your brain. That's it. And when I say in your brain, I'll remind you one more time, it is not something that the gods are fooling with. It's not something having to do with your background, that is your environment, your childhood. When I say happiness is in your brain, we're talking again chemically. That's it. And it varies from person to person, and that's why it can't be described. That's why life doesn't want it described right now through man in that way. There is no happiness, there is no fun, there is no pleasure, there is no release if you're above the life support system of sex, food, and etc. But beyond that, there is no happiness out there, no matter how much fun it is to play music, to listen to music, to go to the theater, to go to the opera, to come here. What you're talking about is something that apparently makes you, in your brain, makes you and your brain put out pleasurable chemicals. As I assume they're still calling them the endorphins. That's it. And there is no question if the opera makes you happy, okay. But if you've got anything else to say then about, well, I tell you what, it's more than just the singing. It's more than just the music. The story on which Mozart based that, do you know the story? It has certain, I don't know, I guess you'd say metaphorical ramifications. Hey, let's talk about it. Fine. Ordinary hobby. But it is nothing more than your brain producing happy juice. It's endorphins. That's it. And it can apparently be the opera. It could apparently be some great spiritual, intellectual guru of some kind making some great declaration, and you go, oh my God, that's wonderful. I feel that's inspiring. You're still talking about brain chemistry. I don't care what it is. You should remember, if you want, I've given you a secret tonight. We're running out of tape for tonight, but I'm telling you, if you remember and pick your own version of it, there's no escape from it. You can't do it wrong. It's to think, to picture, to feel. You can do it. You can do it right this second. And it has an effect. Think biological. That is, think the word if you have to. Now, what's going on up here is chemical. It's biological. It's not psychological. Psychological is the kiddie version of it. It's the brittle version. It's wordy chat going on. But without this chemical change, without the chemical activity going on, there would be no wordy chat of any kind. Whether it be to hell with everybody or boy, I love everybody. None of it would go on without that. And it is radiating continually. You are talking about chemical activity in the brain, nothing else. There is nothing singular that defies, that transcends the limits of the chemistry of the brain. If you can remember, if you can think, and if you can feel continually, in you, just in you, chemical, biological, wet, then it is an easy matter. You'll find out yourself. You don't have to hook yourself up to machines. You don't have to take drugs. You produce what they're calling your own endorphins, but what it is happiness juice. And that will produce brain smile. And that, where I started out tonight, this is not necessarily the point of what this activity is, and it's got nothing to do with morality or doing good, but that happiness brain juice turns you loose from all anger and frustration and desire for revenge, which will keep you earthbound as you're supposed to forever. And you cannot rationalize it away, and you can't pray to any gods to do away with it. If you can, then you don't belong in this anyway, because you're more earthbound, your feet are nailed to this planet. Well, that's not the point. You're no worse off than anybody else, but if you do believe, if that is true for you, that you can pray to gods of some kind, which is no different, you'd be satisfied then when you get upset to go take drugs of some kind. You just don't belong in this. Because you can do it yourself, not because it's better, but because it's better. That is, not because I say it's better, not because it's morally better, but all of it. If you were taking drugs, if you were tied up in some religion, chanting, praying, all you're doing is changing the brain chemistry if indeed it seems to work for you. And if it seems to work, you don't belong here. Because that is at another level. It is too crude to satisfy somebody properly who wants to travel somewhere else, to get to another planet. You can do it, and you can do it now. It's not something you have to go fool with. All you got to do is remember this, and you're going to find out that right then it'll make you smile. Brain smile. It'll make you happy, which I didn't start out with this because that's not the point, to make you happy of all this. Is it? All right, it is the point. No, it's not, but it should be. You would prefer to be happy? You wouldn't prefer to smile? You wouldn't prefer in a more enriched, to the point that I can't even describe it, not give a rat's ass? Not like, well, as you know, not like ordinary people out in life that don't give a damn and all that. I'm talking about an enriched, an otherworldly, a superior. Don't say I didn't ever tell you anything. Think bio. You cannot do that at any given second and continue to think. You cannot continue to follow what seems to be your own brain, your own dialogue. You cannot do them both. And it'll only lead to one thing. It makes your brain smile when you do it. And almost everything that you can do in life begins to wear itself out. Even the fun of drinking and taking dope, you understand, everybody knows this, it diminishes. A lot of people having sex with the same person for long enough, it seems to diminish the thrill. This, it never stops. It will produce over and over. The same way as shooting the right kinds of neurotransmitters in poor brains of the poor rats and chimpanzees that I know they do. I don't want to discuss it. But you do it to yourself, and it never fails. It never fails. You don't have to depend on gods, which don't work anyway, prayers, anybody else. All you got to do is think biological. If what's going on in me right now, I don't care what it is, up here. Forget from down here, we're talking about from the brain up, at least from the hypothalamus up. This is producing chemicals, and I call it thought. And most people call it much more than that. I call it me. I call it my godly self. I call it the indomitable spirit of man. Call it what it is. It's chemicals. And what you can do, once you can just remember it, it continues after that consistently. It produces happiness juice. It produces brain smile. And you can't have brain smile and be mad. Can't. You can't have brain smile and want revenge. But if you can have brain smile, I tell you, you don't want anything else. Now bye.